Hi, I'm Rob Vanstone. I'm staring into the camera and trying to look awake. And this is the 49th edition of the Rough Rider Rumblings video podcast. As always, we pay tribute to a notable Rough Rider whose number is the same as our volume. So, number 49, we honor Jeff Knox Jr., in whom the Rough Riders apparently are not interested, judging by what Jeremy O'Day had to say.
Exactly.
Joel Lipinski, formerly of the Campbell Tartans, University of Regina Rams, and Rough Riders, and one of the greatest people I've ever met. Number 49, Rich Young. He was an undersized nose tackle with the 1999 Rough Riders. Just what every 3-win team needs, an undersized nose tackle. So,
okay, well, you got me there.
So
I was thinking, because we go off, Ray Williams on 48, one of the best all-around interviews guys in the league. Jeff Knox, another great interview, good guy. Joel Lipinski, all-around good guy. So it's a good numbers. I don't know Richie Young at least.
So we got a 50 next, number 50 next week. We got a lovely milestone to commemorate. So we're hoping there'll be cake, and we're hoping there'll be all sorts of streamers and merriment.
Should we introduce me?
Oh, hi.
Hi.
This is Murray McCormick.
Hi.
He's decked out in a new shirt that he's now able to wear because of his reduced girth.
Exactly, it fits. Shirts that fit.
The only bad thing is that somebody somewhere is looking for some drapery. So,
oh, that's bad. I kind of like the look on this a little bit. We got to get some color to this podcast.
That's where I wear my Denver Nuggets hat.
That's true too. I didn't wear my Golden Knights hat because I haven't given up on them yet. But yeah, I decided some color to this.
But Kelly McCrimmon is staying with the Golden Knights, so you should be happy.
That was an interesting press conference to watch. Them all up there, and you could see the who's the former GM? If his name slipped,
George McPhee. He
didn't really want to move up. I don't think. I got the sense watching that he kind of wanted to keep the job, but if he doesn't step away, they lose Kelly McCrimmon. So I think, and I don't know Kelly in the least, but just what I know from him with the Brandon Wheat Kings, he's a guy that deserves this kind of opportunity more than most people.
Kelly McCrimmon is as competent as being a hockey man as anybody is competent at anything.
Yeah.
Just tremendous, as evidenced by the success of the Brandon Wheat Kings during his extended tenure.
Well, he's got some work to do with the Golden Knights because we were looking to take the next step this year, and we kind of fell a little bit short. So
yeah, but you beat the Jets the year before. That was an awful thing to do.
That's when I became a diehard Golden Knights fan. Was that win over the Jets?
The Jets won the first game of that series and quite commandingly, and I thought, oh my goodness, the Jets are going to go to the Stanley Cup final. And 4 games later,
I would have liked to have seen them in the Stanley Cup final. I think just to watch the outdoor, you kind of watch with the Toronto Raptors now when they're doing that Jurassic Land stuff, and it looks cool. But the Winnipeg Jet ones, I liked it because it was authentic. It was kind of like organic. It didn't really. They jumped on it afterwards, but it's like that just sort of started itself and took over.
Yeah,
and I think
nobody planned it. And I was in the midst of one of those during the Nashville series last year, and it was really a cool thing to.
Like, it's cool to see the Toronto people out there too, and the horrible weather, good weather. They're out there cheering on the Raptors, and it looks up. But I don't know. That street in Winnipeg just seems to be so cool.
Well, they need something to be excited about in Toronto because they also have Toronto FC.
That's true too.
Sorry to any Major League Soccer fans out there.
Well, the two of you. Well, sorry for both of you.
I can't stand Major League Soccer. It's an absolute sportscast ender for me. It'll be about 15 or 20 minutes into Sports Center or Sports Central, and they'll start introing Montreal, whatever they are, or Toronto FC, and I'm sorry, if anybody's trying to sell cubic zirconia on Channel 2, I'm buying. I don't want to watch Major League Soccer highlights. And oftentimes, I'll try to bring this back into a football context, they'll run Major League Soccer highlights ahead of anything in the CFL.
Yeah.
On a national sportscast. And it just drives me absolutely bonkers. But it's just instant. It's an instant reflex check for me. Just as soon as there's even the slightest hint that Major League Soccer is coming up in the lineup.
Because it's funny. Did you watch that Engraved on the Nation when they did the story on the fans of the FC?
No.
It's very well. And those Engraved on the Nations are all fantastic. They're on par with 30 on 30 with ESPN. But the fans are pretty fanatic. I guess, sorry, I wouldn't call them anything else. But it's a good show to find out how crazy the fans are behind them and when they set fires at the Ottawa stuff, and you learn about that. So I kind of like their fan base. I'm like you. I don't watch their highlights. Like,
why does anybody care about Major League Soccer? It's just
how many
boring.
games do they play? 100.
The season starts in March and it ends in
March,
in April of the following year, and it just. Anyway.
And they also have a championship every couple of weeks too. That's a CONCACAF or something.
I don't understand any of this, and I don't really care to. So we've totally alienated whatever soccer crowd.
And we didn't once call it football. We called it soccer.
We did.
That's
us. Turning from football to football. Riders are sort of in a Well, there's a draft to discuss. There's the possible sign. As we record this on Monday afternoon, the Rough Riders are apparently interested in Solomon Elimimian. And there's nothing new in the John Ryan situation.
Nothing. He's waiting. Like we are all waiting to see something happening, unfortunately. So what that means.
It's been a month since he worked out for the Rough Riders.
So what
does
means,
that mean?
And O'Day didn't commit anyway when we asked him about it.
They've talked. That's about it.
I think it's money. I think it's always money. But John Ryan also has a lot of money. As I remember talking to him, he's, $17 million he might have made in his NFL career. Does that sound like a number that rings a bell? I don't know what he said. He said he has enough money to look after his kids and his grandkids. So but it's still, he's not going to sign for 55 or whatever. And maybe he doesn't want to come into a league that's got just sort of labor problems. What happens when you sign a guy like that, and how does he show up?
Why is BC not all over him? They've lost Ty Long to the National Football League. Isn't that just
I think it's money. How much money do you want to spend on a punter?
Well, a putter, nothing, because I can't stand golf.
That's
punter,
true too. Yeah.
You know, you look at Josh Bartel, and you look at the numbers, and there's certainly Josh Bartel has proven in the CFL that he can kick if he's just booting the ball. He can boot the ball about 45 yards. Nothing wrong with that. The fact that it was 40.9 last season tells me that it's not Josh Bartel with his leg strength diminishing. It's system.
Yeah, but it's the directional system, though. It's the spots.
Yeah,
it's all boring, but it's all part of what they do.
You know, do you make a big play for John Ryan just to make him a system punter? If so, you've already got a system punter. Yeah. John Ryan in the National Football League with the Seattle Seahawks was tremendous at directional punting and getting it out of bounds inside the 20, preferably inside the 10. I mean, that was contributed to his longevity in Seattle. That he was so adept at that.
Does the smaller field lean towards that a little bit?
A little bit, but you know, it'd be intriguing to see if John Ryan back in the CFL can approach the 50.6 that he put up for Winnipeg in 2005.
And I'm not putting words in his mouth, but I think he'd love to end his career with the Riders.
Oh, it's perfect.
It'd be just, there's so many good things about that, and he's such a good guy in the community, and everything he's done, all these things that you would love to see them. And boy, could our punter become the go-to interview guy after games?
Well, he's certainly the marquee player on the team.
Yeah, he'll eclipse Zach Collaros or anybody else like that. So maybe Jeremy O'Day's weighing that. I don't think he weighs that much, but he wants a locker room that has guys that get along and guys that understand people, and maybe they've looked at that aspect. I can't see people not getting along with John Ryan, but I think it all comes down to money.
I don't think anybody's been born who can't get along with John Ryan, except he's been quick on Twitter to respond when anybody's been racist or homophobic. Yeah. So if you're an idiot and you go near John Ryan on Twitter, you're going to get exactly what you deserve from one of the greatest people I've ever met. So. Yeah. Upstanding person from an amazing family.
Anyway, do you want to move on to something that actually happened?
You mentioned Zach Collaros, and in Monday's paper, you began your series on Rough Riders previews for.
I'm kind of looking forward to getting
position by position.
I'm kind of looking forward to getting through the offense part, because it's pretty depressing about the offense part. You know, it's always based on they were bad last year, so they got to be better this year. The offensive line, remember because I'm writing that one now. It's didn't start out that well last year. Gained a little bit of ground. Cofield came in, so maybe there's
Philip Blake came in, which I think is
that was late in the season. But Cofield was a big guy. He came in because Vaughn started out.
Philip Blake's interesting though.
Yes. Why?
This is a guy who's been a very good player for a considerable period of time.
I don't know if he's going to be a starter this year, though, Rob. I think
and he probably won't be here if you're looking at his salary. I know. You've got to start him or not.
So if you look at him, and just. We're talking.
He's getting a salary that's commensurate with a 33-year-old CFL veteran.
But you look at Cofield, Labatt, Clark, probably Bladdock. I don't know.
It's Bladdock, by the way.
Bladdock?
I once asked him how to pronounce it. It's Dariush Bladdock.
Okay, Dariush Bladdock, and likely Coleman. Those are your 5 starters, and you have Shepley, who's on the team. So where does Blake kind of fit into that role? Does he become the 7th guy?
I don't think you can have somebody who's making what he would be making as a backup.
Well, they cut Travis Bond last year, and he was supposed to be the big guy, literally the big guy on the line, and they cut him in training camp. So
Braden Schramm's got a lot of potential,
and he can play center. So that's where he played a lot last year. He played a little bit. So there's center, and then there's even Vaughn is kicking around as an international. He's still around the roster. So yeah. I don't know where Blake fits in. I couldn't quite figure that out. I think Shepley that's a great signing. I know they signed him since. It adds their depth, I think it created a different draft for them too, that they didn't have to go grab one of these high-end offensive linemen, and they went to grab some good receivers. Now, good receivers, and we don't know if they're going to be here or not. Pretty good chance, but you still can't, as long as they're still trying out there. I understand Justin McGinnis didn't get a contract from the Indianapolis Colts this weekend. He's with the Titans next weekend weekend coming up. And Braden Linus.
Linus. Is it Linus or Linus?
I don't know. I just know how to print it, write it. So he was with the 49ers. I haven't heard anything about him, but he's an interesting one. Kind of a Regina guy that grew up here with all these ties, and a big guy, 6'3", 240.
6'5".
Yeah. Yeah, 6'5", sorry. And be an interesting...
But he caught 6 passes last year.
I know, but he was a tight end, kind of...
So does he become sort of a Patrick Lavoie guy?
Yeah.
Or do you play him outside with his size? I think there's a few things they can do with him.
Yeah, he kind of off. And so does McInnes, too. He's a 6'6" guy, kind of with speed. And maybe...
Wouldn't that be a nice touch? I mean, a lot of the times the Canadians are starting outside, but what a target inside.
Yeah, it'd be nice to do that. So they kind of bolster their receiving core, which we said we needed to do. And Jeremy O'Day, trying to be coy, didn't say they really were going to lean that way, but it's kind of interesting.
And then they picked receivers in each of the first 2 rounds, as you hinted at in the paper last week.
And they're the best available. Like the linemen were really good, and you got to have offensive linemen, but they have depth on the offensive line. And I know one guy doesn't give you that, but it does that. So they didn't really have to jump on some of these offensive linemen. I know some other media guys are saying they should have taken linemen. I think they took what they needed. If they don't take receivers.
They took one, but would they really need one?
No.
They've already got an excess there. And I think that's a nice foundation for the offense. As much as you look at the so-called skilled positions and at least with regard to quarterbacking and receiving, you look at it and think, they do have an offensive line that could be a very good foundation for a team. And they've got a running back who should be able to get 1,000 yards shortly after Labor Day. So
they've done
which they haven't had.
Yeah, and they have Micah Johnson over on defense, another guy they signed. And who knows if Solomon Aluminium ends up here? All of a sudden, the linebackers aren't as much of a question mark. But
I'm not sold on that one.
I don't. He doesn't play Will, and I think they need a Will. I think they need someone to fill in for Samuel or Govin, and Jeff Knox is that guy. And I'm not. A combination of Sam Hurl and Cameron Judge is a pretty good middle linebacker. Like Sam's not going to be a great cover guy. But they're not
going to put him in that situation if they can avoid it.
So
he's a first down guy.
And Cameron Judge was good against coverage. And so maybe Cameron Judge becomes the starting middle linebacker. Good for him because he can play both. But Sam's pretty smart. He plays sideline to sideline and contributes really big on special teams. So maybe they might go that way. But I just think, and then you have Moncrief and all these other linebackers. But what
about Dyshawn Davis?
Yeah, I don't know if he's a Jeff Knox level, though.
But I mean, they signed him very early in free agency. Yeah. Did they do so because of his prowess on special teams, which was evident with BC last year, or because they think he can be part of the linebacking equation?
Sure. How about both? Because I think it's special teams. I think we see a little bit of the special team stuff, and I think we saw a bit of him in the draft when they took Jacob Yonke, a guy who can play back up at safety, but will be a special teams guy for a little bit in the league. He was kind of linebacker size for U Sports, but he's more of a defensive back size in the CFL. And maybe you see Craig Dickinson's fingerprints on it, getting good special teams guys that can help out a lot.
In a draft that wasn't set, it's supposed to be really deep in terms of special teams players.
No.
Which is sort of an anomalous CFL draft.
Yeah, that was pretty good. And then they get Vincent Roy. And then we wrote about Chris Judge, who's Cameron Judge's older brother. And I talked to him on the weekend with the stories in today's paper. Very interesting guy. He led the interesting life. He's kind of these pseudo-Canadians. He has more ties, and they grew up in Canada, but they end up down in the States because that's their parents are broken up, and he ended up in Thousand Oaks and has been out of football since 14 for sure, and trying to become an actor. I guess that's not turned out so well, put on hold, but they talked to him. Jeremy O'Day, they talked to Cameron Judge. Jeremy O'Day did some background stuff. And he told me he talked to Jones. I'm not sure if he talked to Paul Jones or Chris Jones. He didn't really except because the two Jones. And
it's tough to keep up with the Joneses sometimes.
Yes, exactly. So he's 28. There's lots of 28-year-old people in the CFL.
Not starting out, though.
No, that's by
the time they get acclimatized to it, they're in their. Although if he's in his 30s,
he'd be fine for this team.
Fit in just fine in a couple of years. The way they're trending demographically.
But that was, so why didn't they take someone else with the 8th round pick?
Well, it's an 8th round pick.
It's just it's kind of funny. I always think these guys think they always come up here to start their football careers. I think, did you realize you're probably going to make like 55,000 Canadian, even if the new CBA gets up to 60? If you think it's not for the money, it's just because these guys just never give up on football. And it's kind of inspiring to see a young guy. He is a young man, at least compared to me. It'll be cool.
He's about half our age.
Our age. He's younger than my kids.
There's forms of geology that are youthful compared to us.
He's quite younger than my kids, so that's a big step. But I think overall, I kind of touched on everybody, except for Charbel DeBuyer, who's a 6'3", 300-pound defensive tackle. I suggested maybe a possible fill-in or backup to Zach Evans, or maybe down the road. And they're going to need Zach Evans' career is not over by any stretch. And I'm not insinuating.
He's not yet 30.
So, and they've really...
McCann Henry's 32. It doesn't seem like it because he hasn't played for that long, but he's 32 years old.
And he's maybe waiting for a chance. And maybe this is his chance, but Zach's been pretty durable over his career. I don't think he's been hurt. Can't think of that off the head. And so they get a defensive tackle who can maybe play in that spot. So it doesn't hurt to take some depth. So overall, they didn't hurt themselves with the draft. And I think Jeremy Day said they're better. They're better if the two receivers come back.
Yeah. You don't know. You're talking about players that you've never seen, that people have never heard of until last Thursday. And now you've got to instantly appraise this draft. Like, you can't. It's just anybody who tries to say anything definitively is just bloviating.
You kind of ask, and you put O'Day in the spot where, he felt good driving home. If he didn't feel good driving home from the draft, you had a pretty, shouldn't be in the business, sort of. So
I just love to hear a GM or a head scout say once, I didn't really like what we did here. And I'm sure there's been that time when you've gone through a draft as a GM and nothing worked out, and you didn't get who you wanted, and you just absolutely, completely savaged your draft in interviews. No, we didn't think he'd be there because he just, you get all the cliches about we're so happy we had him a lot higher than he went. Like, I wish somebody would say, well, the draft was 8 rounds, so we had to choose somebody, right? That'd
be funny.
And I knew his uncle,
But they didn't expect Justin McInnis to be there, and I can't run the draft off through the top of my head, but the guys who got all picked of Justin McInnis ahead of him all made sense. So I didn't really think, he shouldn't have been there. Braden Linus, you kind of think, might have gone a little earlier than that, but that still happens. Why not? I was going to remember the year the Riders had 2 draft picks, and they took Tamon George and Nick Hutchins. I wondered, do you remember that?
Man, that was
and they were late too. I think Brendan was the GM. Our esteemed columnist was the GM back then.
I remember there was one year they had 3 first-round draft choices and none of them turned into anything. There was Donovan Wright, Kevin Smelly, and Andrew Thomas. I think it was 1989. Like, they had 3 shots at it in the first round and got no longevity out of any of them.
That just tells you what the crapshoot the CFL draft is. It's one of those things where the number 1 pick, the Shane Richards guy, could walk in a room and nobody would know who he was.
Yeah.
And in the NFL draft, we all knew who Kyler Murray was. We all know who Nick Bosa was. We all knew all these other guys. And if they were people wondering why isn't Murray was in a better interview and all this stuff, and they kind of know that.
Why would you draft a guy named Murray?
Because it's a good interview.
Sorry.
You can't have enough Murrays in the world. Where was I?
I don't know. I just threw that in to be
we're kind of rambling here too anyway. But anyway, overall, I say the Riders had a decent draft. We'll see what happens in 2 or 3 years. It makes it great if those 2 guys can play, even on special teams, of McGinnis and Linus end up back here. And O'Day looks like he took a pretty good draft pick.
So what else is there? What else is floating around in
Well, we talked about aluminium a little bit.
Yeah. Don't they? I mean, their void linebacking wise is a guy who can do what what Sam McGuavin did last year, which is basically cover the width of the field with a lot of enthusiasm and a lot of speed. When Derek Taylor was on with us last week, Derek said that the average gain per play on which the tackle was made by Sam McGuavin was 1.5 yards. So it's not like he's playing passenger and getting a lot of cheap tackles and getting guys 10 yards downfield. He was stuffing people regularly and doing it with a lot of mobility. Solomon Alamimian, by the end of this regular season, will be 33 years old. Can he be that player, or do they need that player? Is the Chris Jones scheme is it similar to the Jason Shivers scheme? Do you still need that Sam McGuavin player in the lineup, or does it lend itself more of a traditional player like Solomon Alamimian? I
don't know where the ratio is going to end up. If it stays 7, that middle linebacker is kind of an important Canadian spot for them, and I know. Doesn't you can't you can look at it that way, but they need a Canadian there because they need 3 Canadians to start on the defense. Evans, middle linebacker, and Adam
They're pretty good though. If you look at them Canadian wise, I think they could start 3 on the offensive line.
Yeah.
Corey Watson gives them 4. They're going to use Lavoie a lot. That gives them a 5th. Defensive Zach Evans, number 6. The Sam Hurl Cameron Judge duo, 7. And then Mike Edom gives them 8.
Yeah, so
they've given themselves some flexibility there.
That's a good point. Yeah. I forgot about Lavoie. Lavoie's kind of just where to stick him.
He's going to be great.
I think he's great.
A full year here, I think people are really going to see what he could do. They knew in Ottawa what he could do. They didn't really use him very well in Montreal, but in Ottawa, I asked Henry Burris what Patrick Lavoie can bring to a football team. Yeah. He can do so many things. He has a touchdown in a Grey Cup game.
Yeah.
Given a full year, I think people are really going to like him. I think he's going to get
It's a pretty
at least 50 catches and help out with the run blocking.
Trade deadline move. They get Blake and Lavoie, and they trade Joshua Stanford, who's no longer, and a conditional pick in the 2020 draft. So that's, Chris Jones knew what he was doing back then, and they needed them back then because Dan Clark was just about to be injured or was injured at the time, so they needed someone to play left guard. Blake steps in there, back goes to center, and Lavoie provides that leadership and stuff. So maybe it was pretty good shrewd draft day trade, almost as good as the one when they traded Kevin Glenn and Jerome Messam back in 2015. And they got
those were separate deals. They traded Glenn to Montreal for a 6th, and they traded Messam
for Crapina.
Aaron Picton was also part of that deal.
Yeah, that's it. And so that was another good trade. The Crapina, and we can talk about that. Crapina. Sorry. We don't know what's going to happen with Capina and Brett Lowther this year. We kind of know. I'm thinking.
Well, honestly, unless there's something unforeseen.
Yeah, they're going to keep Brett Lowther and somehow. But I don't know. They would have thought they might have moved Tyler before the draft. Maybe get some value out of him now. But
everybody knows that, and Jeremy O'Day talked about this last week, that this is a player that they're not going to be able to keep. Right. Something's got to give there. So why trade something when you generally probably won't have to give up anything for him and just make a waiver claim, unless I don't think there's multiple teams clamoring for a place kicker right now.
No.
If that was the case, then Jeremy O'Day would have some leverage, but I don't believe that to be true right now.
So just because tomorrow's the next
Can we talk about the Denver Nuggets now?
No. How about we do this? I know this is really, really off base, but let's talk about
Kevin. Was dismissive.
Let's talk about Kevin Mitchell for a second.
Yes.
And Kevin Mitchell is let people know I can get some quick background on him. Kevin Mitchell is a Moose Jaw Times Herald guy, Saskatchewan born, all those kind of stuff. He's a double winner of the National Newspaper Awards, sports writer and journalist of the year for his amazing coverage on the Humboldt Broncos. And I read a word today. I said some stuff. He said he kept it from being maudlin and over the top, and he just kept covering it like he could with compassion and professionalism. I was so proud of him to see him do very well on that. And I know you wrote a great column today touching upon how great a guy Kevin Mitchell is and how people.
And he won a World Series with the '86 New York Mets too.
Did he? Mookie. Is that Mookie?
No, Mookie was the receiver.
Oh, okay.
Sorry about that, Mark.
That was my cat. Anyway, he just hammered me with kicking me off topic. But I was so proud.
Fun.
And it was a proud day. Like Dan Barnes, another the Edmonton Journal writer, sports writer, was nominated. So I tweeted, it was a proud day to be a sports writer.
Cale Neese of the Saskatoon Star Phoenix won a National Newspaper Award for photography, the hockey stick.
Like you wrote about it too, and you could have been up for the awards, but it's just a horrible tragedy. And there's no way anybody here is celebrating the circumstances that led to these great stories out there, but I would just admired so many of the people. And the CP got nominated for its overall coverage of what was going on, and they did an amazing job. So, but to Kevin Mitchell, Times Herald guy, I'm a Times Herald guy. I started there and unfortunately left, and it's no longer in existence anymore. But I'm sure and Kevin, it's funny you mentioned your column. He doesn't swear. He doesn't drink.
Doesn't swear. Like, how does he get by?
I don't know. That's funny because I would say it in the
I've tried to teach him. I've offered all the mentorship that I can provide as one of his elders.
I would ask him if he wants to get an effing beer, and he would when we're on curling together, and he would just sort of laugh at the two of us. But what a great honor for a great reporter, and we have some good ones in this province. And Kevin Mitchell right now is at the top of his game.
Yeah, it really is an amazing thing. I'm an honorary Moose Jaw Times Herald alumni, in that my wife Ursula worked there from 1994 to 1997, and that coincided with Kevin being there. And you look at the amazing sports writers that have come out of Moose Jaw. Yeah. I'm honored to be sitting beside one of them, Rick Moore. Rick Moore was a mentor of Kevin's. Sadly, Rick passed away of cancer, and And Rick covered the Olympics in Sydney. Just an amazing guy. Corey Wolf. Out of Moose Jaw. It's a shame that Corey's no longer writing sports because he was just absolutely
well. I can
tremendous.
Throw a couple of old names at you too. Jeff DeDecker, who became our
he was
entertainment
a sports editor there at one point.
I hired Jeff DeDecker.
Ron Petrie was in at the Moose Jaw Times Herald, wasn't he?
I hired Daryl Davis, who came here to become a Hall of Fame sports writer. I hired him out of Kindersley in Moose Jaw, and another one I'm going to throw at you, Gord McIntyre, who became a fine reporter right now with the Vancouver Sun doing features and stuff. But he was a fine journalist, sports writer.
Austin Davis is with us now.
Yeah, it's just. And it's kind of funny to think, but I remember moving.
Peter Zosky worked at the Moose Jaw Times Herald.
Marlon Marshall used to be our managing editor here. Was there? I remember when we moved here in 82. It was just Marion and I, and we got a job transferred. I got literally transferred from a paper in Ontario. That's how long ago I worked there.
You got transferred
to the Moose Jaw, to the sports editor.
How do you get transferred from Ontario to Saskatchewan?
It was the Thompson chain.
Oh, okay.
And they, I still went there, $190 a week. Still can't get over that one, but. Anyway, and it was when I started our lives together in Moose Jaw. It always has a special part in our lives, and it was sad to see it close down, but by the end, it needed to close down. And as a sports, I get to hire all these guys. And it wouldn't stay very long. I think Daryl might have lasted 6 months, and Gordon might have lasted 6 months. Jeff stayed the longest, Jeff DeDecker, because I think I left there and I came here after I left Jeff. So it was a good place to learn. And, you have to wonder kind of, where do kids go, young journalists go to do that kind of stuff? Because I did everything in Moose Jaw, from souping my own film to writing headlines to writing the stories to everything. You covered it all.
Well, right now the young journalists are asking, what is film?
Yeah. Or they're asking, I think it's funny, the young journalists want to step in and they want to cover the riders, like right away. And they don't want to have to, like you and I both know, we grounded out in high schools and universities and amateur sports and slowly working our way up to where you get to cover the big beat. And now you look at kids, young people, coming in, they get to cover the riders. Right away they're out there or covering a CFL team, or it's just a different world.
It really is. But we're pleased to have you in it with us as we
thank you.
Tangentially discuss things related to journalism. Congratulations to Kevin Mitchell. That's an awesome thing happening to an absolutely phenomenal person and a great writer. So I think there's so many people who are genuinely happy for Kevin, because there's a guy who deserves it, and he needs more Twitter followers. So I hope this will really.
But his writing was amazing, and I was reading the story that he talked to the people. He didn't talk to the politicians. He didn't talk, mind you. Kevin Geringer and some of these politicians were great to talk to.
Yeah, Kevin Geringer, what he did.
And the mayor, what's the mayor's name?
Rob Munch.
He was another good guy. And those
Rob Munch, Munch, Muench.
But those are people that were great to talk to. But I don't know, and to tell you, but I remember, and I was in Mexico when that happened, and Marion said to me, well, she lost me on that weekend because all I did was read every word about that would happen on that bus crash, and Kevin's stuff kept coming out at me, and even now, and the part that you really have to admire is where he keeps writing this stuff still fresh, and we both know it's been over a year, and it can get not as tiring the right word. It's a grind. And,
I was in Humboldt for the first anniversary of the accident, and Kevin was there too. And I wrote my stuff, and I faced that challenge. Like, what do you say that is different than what anything else has been said over the previous 365 days?
Fortunately, you have a lot of experience of that with the riders.
There is some rehash involved as relates to talking about their offense. Yeah. But and I told myself, okay, you're about ready to get schooled, and you're about to deal with a real writing seminar here. And I logged on to what Kevin had written. And this is after seeing it. We'd sat beside each other at the memorial, and we pretty much experienced that weekend side by side. And it's kind of a report card. And I finished writing. I wrote a couple of stories. I said, okay, I took a big gulp, and I said, okay, now it's time to basically see how it should have been done. And I looked at Kevin's stuff, and it was just tremendous, just perfect. Every word mattered.
Yeah, I think
unlike this podcast.
Yeah, well, we're long past the words mattering, but your stuff is pretty good too. I think you're being a little hard on yourself, but Kevin's just outstanding. So what happens this next week before our next podcast? Who knows? Maybe Salominium comes here. Maybe there's some clarity with John Ryan. Maybe maybe they sign, as I suggested in today's paper at the very bottom of my story, maybe they sign a backup quarterback. Because I still feel, and you and I agree with this is not a quarterbacking foursome that's going to head in there with any sort of competition. And
your piece today was great.
Unfortunately, Zach's going to look at us and go, and probably say to you, geez, you've been hard on me all winter. And deservedly so. But They need a veteran. They need somebody. Kevin Glenn.
They might be able to get by with Zach Collaros. They were 10-4 with him last year, so they can win with Zach Collaros. The problem is the likelihood of having to at least spend part of your time without Zach Collaros. Yeah. And that's just the reality of quarterbacking in the CFL too. It's an 18-game regular season. It's tough to go the distance. So for any quarterback. Yeah. Now, so
you'd like your backup
somebody
quarterback
who can come in. And is Cody Fajardo going to be that person? No, is not likely. Is David Watford going to be that person? I don't think so. And is Isaac Harker going to be that person? He's going to need some seasoning. Where's the Joe Barnes to go with John Huffnagel? Where's the Tom Burgess to go with Ken Austin? Yeah. I think if Zach Collaros is going to be your guy, I think you have to support yourself with the veteran. Hello there, Kevin Glenn.
And I'm not saying that Zach Collaros isn't doing everything he can to prepare himself to go through the whole season. I really think he's working out. I don't know how you prepare your brain not to get banged up, but I trust that he's doing that, but he can't control that. Like the hit.
It's a violent game, and has a concussion history.
We still haven't figured out the first one. Remember the first one happened in the preseason game?
Yeah, June 8th against Calgary.
But when?
And why was he in the game? They had hey, I want to play offensive line guys in the game. Like they didn't even have their first offensive line in the game, and Zach Collaros gets hurt in the second quarter of the preseason. Why was Zach Collaros in the game in that situation?
Someone they missed, and then he lied about it. That's still,
and he acknowledged that he did. He didn't tell the training staff. He didn't tell the coaches.
So
because he wanted to play. He's a competitor.
Yeah, hopefully he doesn't do that again. But I think,
and we still don't know what on earth was going on during the playoffs.
No, we don't. And I said, and I've told he was cleared to play.
Why didn't he play against Winnipeg?
Because he was afraid.
That to me is a bigger concern.
I was reading that again this morning. I was reading those quotes again, and he said that he was afraid if he got hurt in the first, second, or third quarter, he'd be putting the Riders behind the 8-ball. Well, yeah, that's nice, but I think they're a better team if you get to the third quarter and not getting hurt and stuff. That's an odd statement.
By the third quarter, I was thinking of going to Chapters to get something to read.
Yeah, it was an odd statement to make.
And
also there was an interesting story that Brandon Bridges with Toronto. Now a Canadian quarterback got taken. Who I still think the Riders should have taken Michael O'Connor. I know they got some good wide receivers out of that, but I still think Michael O'Connor was a guy that can maybe build upon.
Depends if there's a Brandon Bridge rule in that.
Yeah, but it needs
to be an incentive.
Can't you just treat him as a quarterback, though? And I know the CFL rule is an important part, but just treat him as a quarterback. Bring him in. He's as good, in my mind, as David Watford or maybe Isaac Harker, and maybe even a little bit better than them because he's got a better arm and he understands the Canadian game. And he's been American trained, and he's been IMG, he's been Penn State. There's so many good reasons for him to be drafted, and it was great to see him go. I don't see him as your regular Canadian youth sports quarterback. I see him as a youth sports quarterback who's been trained differently and is 6'5" and 230, I think.
Yeah, some of them are undersized. Some of them have the linguini arms.
Yeah, like Noah Picton
doesn't meet that description.
We like Noah Picton, and he's a friend of the podcast. I've always wanted to say that. But
if we have any left after this.
He's 5'9". He's 5'9", and what can he do about that? But 6'5" is you can't coach 6'5", and I just said I'm glad to see him get drafted. I think the Argonauts have got themselves in an interesting situation with 3 Canadian quarterbacks on their roster with Brandon Bridge, Michael Connor, and Noah Picton. If they change the rule, they're in position, and people may have to come talking to them. But actually, just another little tangent. I heard Justin Dunk mention the rule that make all Canadian teams carry 1 Canadian quarterback, and I think that's a little bit of a pipe dream. I don't know, and I'm not saying
then you've got tokenism, and then you've got people not getting a legitimate chance. Just build in the incentive for teams to play them, as there is an incentive existing at every other position.
Yeah.
Look at the offensive line, for example. If teams could play 5 American offensive linemen, they would,
and they'd all be about 55 to 60,000 a year too, because it wouldn't be because who's your most expensive player on most teams? Well, other than quarterbacks, it becomes your starting.
They're not paying Canadian offensive linemen $200,000 because they really like Canadian offensive linemen.
That's it.
But there's the incentive to play them.
Yeah.
Now, build that into the rules. It is so basic. I can understand why they're wary of teams just hiding a Canadian at number 3 and not even playing him to just basically work the system. Yeah. And that might be what happens if you enact a rule that says you have to have a Canadian quarterback. He'll just be you have to have a Canadian quarterback, go get a new chin strap for the number 2 quarterback. But just build in the incentive. If he plays, if he starts, he's regarded as a national. How difficult is that?
Yeah, but
in a league that's called the Canadian Football League, how difficult is that?
But as I said earlier, I think O'Connor is a different quarterback. I think he can play. I think they're going to find out that maybe he can. But is that an issue? That's something in the CBA to talk about changing the ratio. Is that a striking issue?
No.
Have you heard any issues lately that are still strikeable? Other than, we haven't heard about the monetary issues. I know they're back at the board, back at the table today. So maybe, but I still don't see a lot of stuff going out on strike for, other than.
No.
But at the same token, I have workman's compensation and I'm covered if it matter what happens to me. And I know that's a pretty tough thing to say to a guy who's it's been a year, and Jonathan Heffney is going on GoFundMe pages to finish off his surgery. So I think maybe I have to put that aside and look at that. But I still don't see any reasons for him to walk out.
No, and I don't see any reason for either side. It would just be mutually detrimental for it to happen. If it gets to the point where, I think the first preseason game is May 26th.
Yeah.
So if it gets to the point where a preseason game is threatened, you wouldn't have to wait very long for the game of chicken to reach a culmination and for there to be a resolution. I don't understand in 2014 why the players didn't at least push it to the point where a preseason game was imperiled. That would have taken care of it. Because what do the players get out of preseason games other than what Zach Collaros got out of the June 8th preseason game against Calgary last year? And any compensation is really insignificant. Whereas the teams, they're talking attendance, they're talking sponsorships, they're talking concession revenues. So that's the preseason games are weighted, I think, a lot more heavily to the teams than they are to the players as far as benefits that can be derived. So why not, if you don't like what's being offered, at least push it to May 26th and get some form of brinksmanship going here.
Did they start the season last year in training camp at the May long weekend?
I don't recall.
I don't recall either. It just seems like an early start. And I remember, I'm going to complain, I used to be able to start golfing and then the season hit and they wouldn't. But the May long weekend seems a little early to start a football season. But hopefully it starts. Maybe that's a better way to look at it.
Well, you'll have your opportunity to create some irrigation trenches on golf courses soon enough.
Soon enough, yes. Better than, I'll bring you with me.
No.
Are we running out of things to talk about?
We are done. When we're talking about golf, and we've already referenced Major League Soccer, it's definitely time to.
Do you want to read it or do you want me to read it?
I asked for.
Sorry.
This is how engaging this podcast has been. I put out a call on Twitter asking if anybody had any questions, and we don't have any questions. And that was an hour ago. So much for that.
We have to question that, why there's no questions in this.
It's.
I think maybe people listen to podcasts later. I don't know. Does that mean
nobody has any questions? Nobody has anything to ask us.
I think we're so deep and we go so far into this. We leave people questionless.
Maybe they just question why we're doing this, or why they're still watching or listening. Murray, we're going to invite people to more. Having established nobody is responding on social media, we're going to see if anybody can do so via conventional form of communications.
Okay, please rate us on iTunes and leave a review. It helps us grow the podcast. If you'd like to send us a question, you can email Rob at rvanstone@postmedia.com and we'll read it on the show. Hopefully we'll get a question.
Do we have a laugh track to go with that?
Should be having
Mark, do we have a laugh track? No? So Murray McCormick and his
red
shirt.
Yes.
I'm Rob Vanstone and my stained whatever this is. And thank you for being with us. And we'll do this again next week for the Gala 50th Rider Rumblings podcast. We look forward to it and hope you'll join us then as well. Thank you so much for all your time and tolerance today. Take care.